Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice four-game slate for the second round of the playoffs. We have Philly, Atlanta, Seattle, Houston, Cleveland, New York, Yankees, San Diego, LA Dodgers. So in this particular slate, we have four pitchers I really like. I think we have a couple stackable teams, the Dodgers, the Braves, and the Yankees, and maybe even Houston a little bit. But overall, the pitching is pretty good at the top and not great at the bottom when it comes to cheap options. And so that's kind of how this slate looks. I have two top tier options at pitcher and two secondary options. And I think kind of the best way to go about it is to utilize one of each from each tier, so to speak. But we'll get into that more as I get into the pitchers. Before I get started, thank you for liking and commenting and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps a lot. And like this video. Pretty awesome if you could do that. With that said, let's get into the slate itself. So my two top tier options are Julio Urias and Justin Verlander. Now Verlander's averaged 24 fantasy points the last 10. He's also faced Seattle 6 times this season, and he has had 28, 32, 36, 6, 18, and 35 fantasy points against them this season. So obviously he's got a good 25 fantasy points per game average against them, and he's got 43 strikeouts in those games as well. He has given up 6 home runs in those games, so he's not super, it's possible that Seattle does get a couple earned runs, but he does get enough strikeouts that he has pretty good upside here. So he is definitely a top tier option. He's pretty safe, because his floor is pretty high, and so I do like him a lot. The second option as a top tier option is Julio Urias. Now he doesn't get the strikeouts that some of the other guys get, but he has faced San Diego 4 times, and he's had 22, 16, 21, and 18 in this game. The strikeouts obviously the only risk here, but he does tend to get wins, and he tends to go at least 6 or so innings, and so he does have some upside, and he's a little bit. His floor is pretty high, and his ceiling is not as high, obviously, as Verlander, but he's pretty solid. So, I think he's probably my favorite play when it comes to his value, being $8,700. He definitely leads you to have a lot of opportunity to build up at other positions because of his price. And so, as the top tier options, I think while he doesn't have the upside that Verlander has, he's a little bit safer. But that said, let's get into the secondary options. Garrett Cole being the first one. Now, he's had 2 good games against Cleveland at 21 and 34 fantasy points. But his floor is around 15, and he hasn't had that many, high quality games lately. He is averaging 22 fantasy points a game, but if we look at his game log, we're going to see a lot of 15s, 10s, 12s, and 17s, stuff like that, mixed in with a couple of 30s and 40s. And I'm not sure, he just hasn't been going super deep in games. Now, granted, he's probably going to have a little bit of a longer leash here in the playoffs, but I don't like him as much as I liked the other 2 that I mentioned already, and so I think he's a secondary option. Even though he's been again against Cleveland, Cleveland's the hardest team to strike out, but they haven't hit the ball particularly well lately, but I don't love him because of his price stuff either. And then the other secondary option is Max Fried for Atlanta. Now he's averaging about 20 fantasy points a game, and 4 games against San Diego, he's had 22, 16, 21, and 18. He's got the better floor than some of the other guys here, but his ceiling is also lower. He does tend to get a decent amount of strikeouts at times. He has 25 in 4 games against Philadelphia as well, but his earned runs are a little bit uneasy here because he's not quite as good against them as he's been against other teams. But overall, I still think he's a pretty solid play here, and he just feels like he's usually really good in the playoffs, so I really like him in this matchup. But he's a secondary option, but his price point definitely gives him some more upside here. As for the other 4 pitchers, we have Gilbert, Quantrill, Suarez, and Clevenger. Honestly, probably Clevenger and Suarez are probably the weakest of these guys. Quantrill and Gilbert both have had decent games against the teams that they're opposing. Actually, I don't think Quantrill did, but Gilbert did. He had some good games against Houston this year, so it makes me a little skittish on playing against Houston, but overall I still think, or for Houston players, But I still think that Houston's a team that you could potentially stack in this matchup. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the hitters themselves. So at catcher, I have three guys, really, and one of them is William Contreras. He's my favorite option at catcher. He's been really solid against Philadelphia this season, and he's been pretty good lately. Has home run potential here, and he's just a fun guy to roster. He hits the ball well, and I really like him. I think he's my favorite play at catcher today. And his price point's not too terrible. He's a little bit less expensive than some of the other options. Will Smith is the second guy that I like here. He's averaging 7 fantasy points a game. He's been really good against San Diego. And obviously they have a lot of upside here. Now, if Austin Barnes plays, which I don't really expect him to, but he'd be somebody that I'd be a little bit interested in if he ends up playing. But I don't necessarily expect him to do so. And then Travis d'Arnaud for Atlanta, another guy I like here. He's not been as good against Philly this season as Contreras, but if you need a contrarian off of Contreras, he's a good option, and he's a little bit cheaper than him as well. At first base, we have Yulieski Gurriel for Houston. Now, he's probably one of the few guys for Houston I'm going to mention outside of Il2 Van Bregman. Well, actually, there's quite a few guys. But he's been okay against Seattle this season, averaging 6.2 fantasy points a game. He hasn't been amazing lately, but he's been good, and his price point's cheap, so you can mix him in to pay up for some other guys, and he won't hurt you too bad. The next guy I like is Josh Naylor. He's hitting 7.2 fantasy points a game. Obviously, it's a little bit of a tough matchup because he's against Cole, but he's been extremely good against the Yankees this season, and I suspect that of anybody on Cleveland, he's probably the best option on the slate. As for the other two guys I like here, Anthony Rizzo for the Yankees, he's in a good spot here. He hasn't been hitting the ball as well, but he's still hitting good against Cleveland this season, and I do like him in this matchup. He has some good upside, and his price isn't way too expensive. And then finally, Freddie Freeman for the Dodgers. He's averaging 9 fantasy points a game, and he's averaging almost 10.5 for the Dodgers against San Diego, and I really do like him in this position. Obviously, he's priced pretty high, and so, it just depends on how you're going to figure out how to use them if you decide to. At second base, we have Jose Altuve, obviously the top option. He's always a home run threat. He hits the ball well. He's averaging 10 fantasy points a game, hitting the ball extremely good lately. But his price does, is pretty high, so you have to deal with that. The next guy I like is Gabby Torres. Where is he at? He is day-to-day, but if he does play, he should be somebody that I like to utilize here. Hopefully he comes and plays. He should be back, I think, but we'll see. But he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately, and I do like him here, averaging 12 fantasy points a game, hitting 378. So we'll see if he does play. So if he does play, then he's definitely my top option at second base. And then Gene Segura, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but anyway, he's hitting 303. His total fantasy points a game hasn't been great lately, but he's still hitting the ball pretty well, and so I do like him as a secondary option. And then also, where's the other? Oh, yeah. So Oswaldo Cabrera, if he does play, he's averaging 7 fantasy points, and he could also play outfield, so he's a guy that I like there as well. But you could fit him in at second base if you didn't want to pay up for anybody here, or if Torres is out. At third base, we have Alex Bregman. Bregman's been hitting the ball pretty well lately, averaging almost 7 fantasy points a game, which is right around where he is against Seattle as well. He hasn't been super solid, but I do think he's pretty decent for his price. Austin Riley is another guy I like here against Suarez. Obviously, he's pretty expensive, and he hasn't been hitting the ball pretty well, all that good, but he's been great against Philadelphia this year, and he is a lot better at home than he is on the road, and this is going to be a good start for the series for him. And then also Alec Boom for Philly. If you don't do Max Fried, then he's somebody to take a look at. He's been pretty good against Atlanta this year, hitting 342, 7.4 fantasy points a game. Not a ton of guys have been that good against Atlanta, but he's oddly been one of them. And so that's what I like here against them. One other guy I will mention is Justin Turner. Now, I don't love him because his fantasy points per game is at 3.2 for the last 10. But he has hit 306 against San Diego this year. 11 fantasy points a game. And so if he can get out of this funk he's been in, I mean, he's been getting hits. It's just he hasn't been doing much with them. If he can get, out of that funk, then he'd be somebody you like. But he just hasn't been very good lately. At shortstop, we have three guys. Sorry. First being Jeremy Pena. Obviously, if he plays, he's going to be a guy that I like, which I suspect he's going to play. He's been hitting the ball extremely well lately. Hit a home run in 2 of the last 3 games, and I do think he's in a good spot here. But we'll see if he does start. He'd be my favorite play at shortstop if he does play. Dansby Swanson, he's been averaging 9 fantasy points a game the last 10. He's been pretty solid against Philly this year, and I do like him in this matchup. Plus, it being a home game is an advantage for him as well. And obviously, Trey Turner for the Dodgers. He's been extremely good lately, having some really big games as of late. Averaging 10 fantasy points a game against San Diego. Obviously, his price is extremely high, but if he does play, then, if you can't afford him, then he's definitely going to be a guy that you want to take a look at. There really isn't a ton else here. Maybe Isaiah Kiner for Lafa, but he hasn't been hitting the ball as well lately either. And so he is kind of a secondary Hail Mary option type of situation. In the outfield, we have several good options here. Will Myers for the San Diego's a guy I like here. 8.6 fantasy points the last 10 games. Obviously a little bit of tough matchup against Urias, but I do think somebody's probably going to get some runs in the San Diego game. Even if you use Urias, it's okay. I do think that a couple guys might get some hits, and he'd probably be the most likely candidate. Chase McCormick has been pretty good lately, averaging 7.3 fantasy points a game, and hitting a whopping 367. And so, he's been getting lots of hits, and he's actually doing some stuff with those hits too, which is good. And so I do think he's in a good spot, and he's pretty cheap. Then Oscar Gonzalez for Cleveland against the Yankees. He's averaging 7.4 fantasy points a game, 325. So that's the thing about Garrett Cole is he does tend to give up some runs. So I do think that a couple guys on Cleveland are definitely worth taking a look at. I already did mention Oswaldo Cabrera. Cody Bellinger for the Dodgers, another guy I like. Okay, he's averaging almost 7 fantasy points a game and hitting 300 lately. If he can continue that, he's hit 7 fantasy points a game against San Diego this year. And if he can continue to hit the ball decently, then he'll be able to score enough points to make him pay off at his price point. And then Kyle Tucker for Houston. He's in a great spot here, averaging 7 fantasy points a game. And I really like him in this matchup. And then Chris Taylor for the Dodgers. Now, he's also day-to-day, but if he does play, he's somebody to consider because of his price point. As for the more expensive options at the outfield position, Acuna has been hitting the ball extremely well, averaging 7.6 fantasy points a game. He's home run potential, and you can tell that he's ready to, try to have a big game here. Obviously, Aaron Judge is in play. Jordan Alvarez looks really good here, he's hitting almost 400 the last 10 games. He's been great against Seattle this season. And then also, Glencario Stanton, he's averaging 8.6 per last 10. I really like him in this matchup. And then, so that's what I've got. Oh, Nick Castellanos. Now, he hasn't hit the ball well at all lately, but if he can get out of a slump, this is a type of situation where I like him as a kind of a Hail Mary option. So, and last but not least, Trey Thompson. Trace has been really solid lately, 7.2 last 10 games. Hasn't been particularly good against San Diego, but he's been hitting the ball well, and I do like him in this matchup. So with that said, I think that's what I've got for this slate. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. Good luck with this playoff slate. It is a little bit more of an annoying slate than sometimes because there's not a ton of value, but there is enough that you can mix and match the pitchers and make a pretty decent lineup. So with that said, again, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day, guys.